Hello, my name is Kenji Katayama from Chuo University. And first, I would like to thank the organizing committee for giving me this very nice opportunity to share our recent results. And today I'm going to talk about the new type of the microscopic technique, and which is applied for the Z-scheme photocatalytic water splitting seed. So at first, what I would like to introduce the contents of this talk. First, introduction, and second one as the new microscopic technique. And in the third topic, I will talk about the application for Z-scheme photocatalytic seed and summarize it, our talk. So first, introduction. So our target is semiconductor particulate films such as TiO2 and also strontium titanium oxide, bismuth vanadate, hematite, and copper oxide, and so on. And these semiconductor particulate films have been used for many solar devices such as photocatalysis, water splitting, and also solar cells, as you know. And what the key factors for photo devices are thinking about the photocatalyst? For example, when the light is illuminated, the electron holes are excited, and electron is used for reduction reaction, and holes are used for oxidation reaction. In the water splitting, the electron is used for hydrogen generation, the holes are used for oxygen generation. In a solar cell, a bit different, but light absorbed by for example, light absorber such as dye, and electrons are transferred to the circuit, and in the other direction, holes are transferred to the circuit. So in any photo devices, actually the key factor is the same. Somehow we need to stop the recombination, and then extract them to the circuit or interfacial reactions. So this kind of charge separations are important, and to know how much charges are well separated, we have to study the lifetime and the transport properties of charge carriers. If we only need the lifetime and the transport properties, it's not difficult. We can search in the Google. But the real problem is due to the structure of the film, which is made of the nanoparticles. When we think about 1 centimeter device, we have a million of 10 nanometer particle in one dimension. So meaning that many interfaces, defects, and cracks in the substrate. So if you look into the TiO2 nanoparticulate film, for example, and from the micron scale to nanoscale, you could find many interfaces and the defects and the cracks. So do they matter? And yes, because looking at the single crystalline TiO2, here the transient absorption response, and if you look at the response, it shows a single exponential decay, which indicate the homogeneous charge carrier decay. However, if you change it to the particulate form, on the order of the nanosecond, microsecond, and also millisecond, even the second order, you could find some very slow responses due to the various type of charge carriers on the surface. So the carrier behaviors are totally different for crystalline and particulate films. So what we have to do is we have to find out which charge carriers are actually active for the reaction, which are not useful. So what we have to do is we have to study the local charge carrier, because there are many different types of defects there, and causing the charge carriers to trap locally, and the lifetime extend wide and long range. And then what happened in the sample actually is the locally excited charge carriers decayed with different lifetimes. So we have to study spatial temporal information of charge decay. For studying the local charge carrier dynamics, of course, people may think that time-resolved fluorescence microscopy is one of the good options, and it's true. In the case of photocatalytic or photodependent materials, this method could only detect the emission of charge carrier. So, in the process of the charge, there are many non-emissive charge carriers, so they are ignored. The other good option microscopy, of course, and this is a really good option to study the local charge carrier dynamics. And here's a very nice review, Professor Zhu and Chen recently, and two pulse light irradiated. And then by using the pump probe technique, you can obtain the local charge carrier response like this. Another example here is applied for the perovskite sample, and you could see the charge carrier decay and also diffusion on an order of the picosecond time regions. But in my understanding, there's some issue on sensitivity, and application is mostly limited in the auto-first time region. And also, now mostly point scanning measurement is used, which is time consuming for the measurement. So we developed different type of the microscope, which is called a pattern phase microscopy, which is PIP. That's how we developed a new type of microscope, which is called a pattern illumination time resolved phase microscopy, and I will introduce some of the results by this. So here's the setup of the Pipm method. In this method, we use a pump and probe pulse light for the measurement and pump of the pump probe measurement. The pump light was first reflected as DMD, a pattern of the light, and which is illuminated down to the sample, and a probe light illuminated the sample to image the sample. So by using the Taubel self-imaging, we defocus the sample to the image to the intensity image. So at DMD mirror, we can illuminate any type of the patterns. I will explain the reason for this. And then the sample is excited with this kind of pattern of the light, and due to the charge excitation, refractive index changed, and then we obtain the time sequence of the images. So here's a setup movie of here. So we illuminate the pump pulse after reflected by the DMD mirror to the sample position, and we at the same time we image the sample with Taubel self-imaging method. So there are two special things about this method. First one is image recovery by using the informatics theory. As I mentioned, we intentionally make a contrast of the excited region, which is preferable for many different types of the image recovery technique, such as PCA-based method, or lasso, which is absolute shrinkage separation operator, and which is used for the noise reduction drastically and described here. And also the special feature is the detection of the phase images. And phase image detection is preferable for detecting the dipole change at the boundary. And in any photocatalytic processes, we observe the charge transfer at the interface. So which involves the dipole change at the interface. And also this method can be easily applied for a rough surface. And now preparing the description in a different paper. So I will show one of the examples, the TiO2 nanoparticulate film. And this is the illumination pattern I use. And you could see what kind of data we can obtain here. So you could see that this kind of the structure pattern or the sum of the square pattern, this is a region where the charge carriers are excited and then gradually decayed on the order of microsecond in the case of TiO2 nanoparticle film. And then these image sequences we can obtain. So by calculating and analyzing these contrast of the image, we can obtain the average response. As you can see, this response in the logarithmic time scale, obviously not like the exponential decay. And then people often analyze this one with different type of functions, such as the different power of the time or the stretched exponential function. But in essence, this is due to the mixture of the signal at a local heterogeneous structure. So what we did is we analyzed the time response of each local response and collect all the responses. Usually, we obtain this kind of average response by averaging these responses, and which is difficult to interpret. However, we directly use the clustering method to separate the clustering of the responses. And then, depending on the clustering, and we made a color map to distinguish which type of the charge carriers are excited in each region. So here's one of the example on a TiO2 nanoparticulate film with 200 times 150 pixels. And in this region, we could obtain many numbers of the responses. And by using the spectral clustering technique, we could categorize these three responses. One of them is similar as the average response, but we could find a very sharp, short response like this. And also we could find that there's the regions with no response. And then, for example, in the local response in this small region, if you look carefully, we could actually find many spot-like response like this. And then when we categorize our responses, we could find a no response region and then the sharp spotted response and also average responses. And they can map out like this category map. So by using this technique, we can find some hidden local response if you use the average, if you average the response, and which was assigned for the non-radiative exciton decay of TiO2 in this case, and one was published in last year in JPCC. And then this method was applied for this scheme photocatalytic material. And the concept of this scheme was first found by Professor Abe, where the two different semiconductor materials were used and charges are transferred via the redox and enhance the whole photocatalytic water splitting. And these days, it's now more sophisticated photocatalytic water splitting, where the two different materials are used and then charge mediate is used for direct charge transfer between two materials. And now the best one is show the 1% STH. And in Japan, now a pilot plant for hydrogen generation has been deployed for a test, and then which is intended for the synthesis of useful chemicals. And also the Dr. Tokudome at Toto Corporation in Japan developed a large-scale printable photocatalytic seed. And this is a sample image. So when the light is illuminated, it can generate hydrogen and oxygen with 0.4% of SDH. And this is made of the two different materials of the bismuth vanadate and oxide, and as a charge transfer mediator, ITO is used. So looking at this material seed by using the EDS, you could see the bismuth, strontium, and indium position. And by overlapping here, you could find the bismuth vanadate position in the ITO and STOR. So mostly the particles are well dispersed. But of course, this is made of the different nanoparticle, different types of nanoparticles. Sometimes aggregate you could find. So what we did is we were trying to find out the local charge carrier dynamics by the Pipm method. So make the story short, I will show some summary of the research. So we could successfully categorize the charge carrier response into three, and then one of them is active for water splitting, and then two inactive for water splitting. And we can map out on a surface, and then we could recognize an active and inactive sites. And this local photocatalytic activity was described in the recently published paper. So first, I will show the analysis of charge carrier response. So what we could obtain, so we use this kind of the illumination light pattern, and this is the optical image of the sample. And what we can obtain is, as a time resolved image is something like this. So gradually you could see the contrast of the light pattern, and then they gradually disappeared, right? And what we could obtain from here is we could calculate the time response of the refractive index change in acetonitrile. And at first, we study the effect of water. So in this materials, at first, light excites the electron and holes. And within picosecond, they are dropped to the drop state, like a shallow state or deep states. And then nanosecond time region where we measure, and these charges are recombined. Because then in acetonitrile, charge transfer at the interface was prohibited. And then charge exchange between the two materials could be included. However, in water, since these materials have a very high water splitting activity, it should include the hydrogen generation and water oxidation processes. So that's why this response was decayed by using the water as a solvent. So it means this signal includes the water splitting processes. To assign each of the processes, we studied each of the materials. First, the bismuth vanadate sample. So in the acetonitrile, first excited charges are trapped, and then in acetonitrile, the charge transfer prohibited. That's why the recombination happens. In water, the water oxidation occurs, and this region decayed. So in this materials, about 1 microsecond, the charge water splitting processes are included, trapped hole. In the case of strontium oxide, so after excitation, charges are trapped, but in acetonitrile, charge transfer blocked, and then a recombination happens. However, in water, since hydrogen generation was allowed, that's why this peak was reduced. So it should include that electron in STOR about microsecond order. However, actually in acetonitrile, this peak was shifted to the slower time scale. This is because in strontium titanium oxide with rhodium has a rhodium state in between, which was studied by the Professor Kudo very always in detail. So this hole can work as a recombination center for electrons, which was confirmed by the scavenging this hole by methanol in our measurement too. So trapped electron in the STOR in microsecond, and also rhodium state about 10 microsecond in acetonitrile could be included in this signal. So in the complete system in acetonitrile, we have 3 components like this. So first one is somehow not affected intrinsic recombination processes. And the second process is due to the recombination, which is used if it's in the water. And the third process corresponds to the rhodium state trapping, which is not good for water splitting. Finally, I will talk about the charge carrier mapping of photocatalytic activity. So first, we use the clustering analysis for efficient Z-scheme system, meaning that ITO is included as a charge mediator. So in this case, we could obtain this kind of the response image, but not in this image. However, by analyzing the clustering analysis, we could categorize 3 different time responses, and it could be mapped out on the surface. And we could recognize this red one is active and the blue one is inactive, because we know that this blue one is due to the intrinsic recombination, and this red response is the charge for water splitting, and this green one is a rhodium state trap. So we could find a larger area of the red and show the water splitting. And when we observe the different regions, again, we could obtain this kind of a response image. But we could have the similar type of the category of the responses, but in this case, the map out image was red and green mostly. And so, which is indicate that the red region is water splitting active, but green region is a rhodium state trap. And also looking into the different regions, we could still find that the 3 similar category of the charge responses. But when we map out on the surface, mostly and some of the blue there. So it's a mixture, but mostly water splitting active. However, if we use the inefficient Z-scheme system, meaning that we intentionally make this removal of the ITO as a charge made. In this case, we still have some sort of the charge response images. And by analyzing this, still we could find 3 similar type of the category of the images or responses. However, when this one is mapped out to the surface, obviously green region increased, indicating the rhodium state trap of charge carriers. So it indicates these are inactive photocatalytic activity. So That's why due to the charge transfer, inefficient charge transfer, the reagents were inefficient. So with that, I would like to conclude our here that we introduced the Pipm method for you, and also show some of the example by using the TiO2 nanoparticulate forms, which are summarized in these papers. And also this method has been applied for Z-scheme photocatalytic seed, which was really recently published here. So I would like to thank our member, especially the Ebihara. He worked on this very intensively, and also support this measurement by Juliange. And also I would like to thank the Professor Song, who moved to Chumbak National University in Korea recently. And with that, and also I'd like to thank the funding agency. With that, thank you for your kind attention.